So some of you know that when Victoria and I first started dating, it wasn't quite love at first sight. It was a little rocky. The beginning of our love story wasn't exactly smooth. See, we met at work, and I wanted to find some excuse to try to connect with her. So I texted her. It was a Tuesday, and I was just trying to find something to say. So I texted her, and I said, hey, when do we get paid? And she goes, well, Friday. And I go, oh, okay, cool. Anyway, so what are you doing tonight? She goes, I'm actually playing volleyball at my church. And I was like, wow, that sounds super cool. Like, that's really incredible. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, nothing. I'll just be here alone at my house. And she had total pity on me. And she's like, well, I guess you can come play volleyball if you want. And I was like, sure. And immediately she knew she made a mistake because she goes, wait, what, really? You don't have to come. And actually, there's no pressure. You don't have to actually come. And she was panicking. And I was like, no, it's too late. I'm coming. So I showed up. And no joke, she didn't talk to me the entire time. Literally. Like, I show up to this church I had never been to, come in, I don't know where I'm going. She didn't introduce me to anybody. Everyone there is like, who's this guy wandering around? She didn't even play on my volleyball team. She went on the other team. Brutal the entire time, but I'm still trying to put the moves on, so I stay late. Try to talk to her afterwards, hang out, and I'm literally not kidding when I tell you that she walked out of the building, didn't turn around, said bye, ran to her car, jumped in the car, and peeled out of the parking lot. Like, her tires screeched and everything. And I was like, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I can take a hint. I don't think she's that interested, and that's fine. That's totally fine. So I was driving home, and I can't explain. There's something about that situation was so weird that I'm like, I don't know. I got to check in on her and see how she is. Maybe I offended her. Maybe I did something. I have to still work with this person. I don't want it to be awkward. So I picked up the phone, and I called her. Now, if you're under the age of 30, you know how scary that is. I cold called her out of nowhere after this awkward encounter on the way home. She actually picks up the phone, and she goes, hello? And I'm like, she's laughing, she knows. And I'm like, yeah, hey, just checking in. If you're not interested in me, that's totally cool. It's not going to be weird. It's totally fine, but I just want to check in, make sure, you don't hate me, I didn't do something. Then what happened was a 2-hour-long conversation where she's like, oh, well, you're not a Christian, and I can't date you because we're unequally yoked, and I can't be seen with you. And it just went on, and I was not a Christian at this point. I have no idea what she's talking about. So after 2 hours, finally, I was like, Victoria, please just answer me one question. Are you at all remotely attracted to me? And she goes, yeah, I guess. And I was like, good enough, and I hung up the phone. Not exactly this smooth start to our love story. But you know what? It's been about 10 years since then. We've had 2 kids. We have a wonderful home, a beautiful life together. And sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if I'd never picked up that phone? What would have happened? I look at my daughter, I look at my son, and I go, what would have happened if I hadn't picked up the phone on the way home that day? And that gets me thinking, how many other opportunities have I missed because I didn't take the initiative? Not just in my romantic relationships, but how many opportunities in life have I missed because I didn't take action? How many gospel-centered conversations have I missed because I didn't take initiative, I didn't take action? And I think there are a lot of opportunities. This is a problem that we can all deal with. We can miss opportunities when we don't take action. Maybe you're here today and you're trying to decide where to go to school, what job to take, what career to have, and you're like, I don't want to make the wrong choice because I want a good career that's going to set me up well for my future so I can be happy, but you just don't know what to do. Maybe you're trying to figure out where to buy a house or where to live or what apartment, and you're like, I don't know which one to pick because I want to pick one that's centrally located but not too far away from other things, and I want to pick a house that's going to make me have enough money, but I don't know what to do, and I'm scared to make a decision. Maybe you're here and you're like, I'm about ready to get into a relationship, or I think I might need to get out of a relationship, but you're scared you don't want to make the wrong choice. You don't know what to do. Maybe you're here and you're a little bit afraid of having a gospel conversation with someone around you because you don't know how they're going to react. You don't know what social consequences might happen. You don't know what they might say. There might be opportunities in your life that you're afraid to take action on because you're not exactly sure what to do. And I think for believers, this is even more of a danger because we can do this weird thing where we over-spiritualize it, can't we? There's something weird where we think that it's more spiritual to do nothing than it is to take action. We can say, no, I'm going to sit back, do nothing. I'm going to wait on the Lord to open a door or to close a door. But the only time that Jesus talks about doors, he says to go up and knock on it. We can over-spiritualize doing nothing and think that it's actually what God wants us to do. But today, back in Ruth chapter 3, we're going to see that the women in Ruth, Naomi and Ruth, they don't just sit back and wait to be rescued. They take action. In fact, they actually show faith by taking action. This is our big idea. If you don't remember anything else, write this one down. We got to show faith by taking action. Before we jump into Ruth chapter 3, it's been a minute, like Josh was saying, since we've been there. So let's get our grounding. Let's get our context a little bit. Chapter 1, Naomi has lost everything. Her husband died. Her sons died. The only thing she has left is her daughter-in-law, Ruth. Ruth and Naomi move back to Naomi's hometown in Bethlehem. When they get there, chapter 2, Ruth starts working in the fields to try to get some food for them, to provide for them. They have nothing. They're broke. They're poor. They have no support. Just so happens that Ruth starts working in the field of one of the few people on planet Earth who can turn their situation around. The man's name is Boaz. Boaz is a kinsman redeemer, which means that he has the opportunity to buy Naomi's land, rescuing her from poverty, and to marry Naomi and continue the family line. Except there's a couple problems. Problem number one is that Naomi is too old to have kids. Even if her and Boaz got married, she wouldn't be able to have children, and her family would end with her. Second problem is that there has been an undetermined amount of time between chapter 2 and chapter 3. We don't know how much time, but it's enough time that Naomi and Ruth are looking at their watches going, these kinsmen's redeemers aren't doing their job. It's a Boaz and at least one other guy who have the opportunity to redeem them, and they're not doing it. They're dragging their feet. And then there's the third problem. And this is probably why they were dragging their feet. We're not exactly sure, but it seems like these kinsman redeemers didn't want to move forward because of Ruth. Ruth was a foreigner. She was a Moabite. Back then, that was a really big deal. In fact, in Deuteronomy chapter 23, God prohibits Moabites from entering into the assembly of God. Ruth wasn't a second-class citizen. She was a fourth-class citizen. She was the lowest of the low, and the kinsman redeemers didn't want the baggage of Ruth coming along with the land. So Naomi is thinking about this, and she realizes that the perfect solution to both of their problems is this. Ruth and Boaz need to get married. Because if Ruth and Boaz get married, then her land gets purchased by Boaz. She can be rescued out of poverty, and Ruth can have a family of her own. Naomi feels loyal to Ruth. Ruth's been with her through thick and thin, so she doesn't want to abandon Ruth. So she's got to get Ruth and Boaz together. But Boaz is dragging his feet. He sees Ruth like a foreigner. So they come up with a plan. And this is the plan. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, she's talking to Ruth, she says, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you?" Which means, should I not give you a husband? You deserve rest and a family and a life of your own, that it may be well with you. Is not Boaz our relative, whose young women you were with? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, anoint yourself, put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, and then go uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." Ruth replies, "All that you say, I will do." So Naomi says, "Listen up, Ruth. We got to get you and Boaz together. But right now, he just sees you as a fourth-class citizen, so we got to do something about this. You need a makeover. Get your hair done, get your nails did, put on some nice perfume, put on your fanciest clothes. It's like a Princess Diana makeover moment. She gets fancy for him. You got to look the part. Once you look the part, you got to approach him with this marriage suggestion. But here's the problem. She couldn't just do that in front of everybody because there was another guy in front of Boaz in line. So if Ruth approached Boaz in front of other people, Boaz is a man of integrity. He knows that he has to turn her down. If Ruth proposes marriage to Boaz in front of other people, he's got to turn her down because there's another guy who's got rights ahead of her. So Naomi says, "Listen, you got to wait until nighttime when there's not a lot of people around. Don't go right after work." This is so practical. Ladies, you know this. Don't go right after work. Wait until he's had a meal. He's going to be in a better mood. You got to time it right. Get your clothes on. Wait until he's eaten. Don't do it in public, but you can't just do it at nighttime because here's the thing. Boaz is at a threshing floor, which means it's this wide open space in the field. That's where they would process the wheat that they harvested. And what would happen is all of the workers would work all day, they'd eat, and they'd go to sleep right there on the threshing floor. So Boaz is asleep, and all around him are his boys. So what's he going to do? Well, they come up with this very clever plan to go uncover his feet. That seems a little weird to us, but it makes a lot of sense. I don't know about you, but when I get woken up in the middle of the night, like suddenly, and if it was by a stranger, I would make some noise. I would go, "Bleh!" I don't know. Sometimes Victoria wakes me up in the middle of the night and I get startled and I wake up our kids. Like I get shocked in the middle of the night. So instead, Victoria's learned, like you gotta approach me a little gently. You gotta ease me into waking up. It's the same thing here with Boaz. She doesn't want to alert all his boys around him. So they make the plan to uncover his feet. So Ruth is going to lift the blanket off of Boaz's feet. And as the night gets colder, the cold air is going to make him uncomfortable on his feet and wake him up gently. Really clever plan. It's got to be said, though, that this phrase, "uncover his feet," in the original language for these people, it's a very flirtatious thing to say. Like uncovering someone's feet is like a little spicy. It is. It is. There would be no mistake. Listen, men haven't changed that much in 2,000 years. I can tell you from experience, we can miss some signals that women put out that they're interested in us. We can be a little oblivious. So Naomi says to Ruth, "Hey, listen, you got to make your intentions clear. You got to say, hey, I'm not here as a friend. I'm here as someone who wants to be your wife." Very flirtatious. Can you feel, can you feel the romance in the air? It's like the modern day equivalent of a woman putting her hand on a man's thigh. It's like, ooh. Very clear what your intentions are. Ruth hears this plan, and she says, "Sounds good to me. Everything you said, I am going to do." And she does. She executes the plan, she takes action, and everything goes according to plan. She gets all done up, gets her hair did, her nails done. She waits till Boaz is eaten, kept an eye on him so she doesn't accidentally wake up the wrong guy. Waits till he goes to sleep, sneaks over, takes the blanket off of his feet, lays down, and then waits for him to wake up. Now, you got to put yourself in the shoes of my man Boaz. Boaz has had a hard day of work, honest work, harvesting his grain. There's no longer a famine. He's had a big harvest, satisfying work. At the end of the day, he's had a big meal, hung out with his boys. Finally, completely satisfied, he gets cuddled up in his blanket, snuggled up, lays down, and goes to sleep. And then, in the middle of the night, he starts to get a little uncomfortable. Just flips over a couple times. And then he's like, my feet are a little cold. So he kind of sits up, and he starts to put the blanket over his feet, and he cracks open his eyes. And in front of him is this woman in his bed. And he says, "Who are you?" He's completely shocked. He's met Ruth before, but he doesn't recognize her. She's had that Princess Diana makeover. She looks totally different. It's completely black. It's the dead of night, and there's this strange woman in his bed. Boaz is shocked and a little scared because he's a man of integrity. This is not a good look for Boaz. He's like, what is going on? Ruth says, "I am Ruth." Oh my goodness. This is a very, very significant thing that she says, because the first time that Ruth is introduced to Boaz in chapter 2, this is how it goes down. She's described as, she is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. The first time that Ruth is introduced to Boaz, she doesn't even have a name. She's this foreign woman with Naomi. And now she shows up in Boaz's bed in the dead of night, dressed to the nines, and she says, "About time you learn my name. My name is Ruth." Whew. Can you feel the tension in the air? It gets even spicier because it says servant here, but she actually doesn't mean servant. It's hard to understand in the English, but the way that she's addressing him is as an equal. She's saying, "My name is Ruth. About time you took notice of me, and I'm an eligible bachelorette." Woo! If you're sitting next to your parents, I'm sorry. I know it's in the text, though. It's awkward. It's spicy. It's a romance. It gets even bigger, because here's the next thing. Up until this point, everything has gone according to the plan that Naomi gave Ruth, and now, for the first time, we deviate from the plan. The next thing that's supposed to happen is that Boaz tells Ruth what to do, right? Boaz is going to come up with a plan. He's going to tell Ruth what to do. But Ruth says to Boaz, "Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Boaz doesn't tell Ruth what to do. Ruth tells Boaz what to do. Incredible. Your jaw would have been on the floor if you were an ancient person. This foreign woman goes up to this worthy man, high status, in his bed at night, says, "About time you learned my name." And what she says is incredible, because she's referencing the prayer that Boaz prayed for her back in chapter 2. Don't forget, he said this. Boaz prayed this for Ruth when he met her: "The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." So Boaz, when he meets Ruth, prays for her that God would protect her. Now, when Ruth shows up in his bed in the dead of night, she says, "Hey, Boaz, how about you spread your wings over me? Don't just pray for God to protect me when he's put you in front of me. How about you protect me? In fact, how about you step up and do your job and become the redeemer?" Hey, Boaz, about time you manned up. She's basically making a marriage proposal and calling him out. Wow. Ruth is savage. Boaz, he's kind of into it. He says, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear." Boaz is here. He says, "I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman." Started off with Ruth doing everything that Naomi said. Now Boaz is doing everything that Ruth said. Complete topsy-turvy, but don't miss this. Boaz says that she is a worthy woman. Apparently, Ruth was an eligible bachelorette. There were other younger men than Boaz who were interested in her. But Ruth didn't pursue marriage with them. She's pursuing marriage with Boaz. She's not doing it out of her love for Boaz. It's not because he's young. It's not because he's rich. She's marrying Boaz, not out of love for Boaz, but out of love for Naomi. She says, there's lots of people that I could marry, but I'm choosing to marry you because if I marry you, Naomi's family gets redeemed. This is a very selfless act of love. Boaz knows exactly what's happening, and he says, this act of character proves that you're a worthy woman. This was a big deal because remember, Ruth is a fourth-class citizen. And Boaz is saying, although you may be a foreigner, your character is that of a person of God. Everybody can see it. It wasn't the perfume or the feet or the clothes that convinced Boaz to marry Ruth. It was her character. It was this great example of selfless, loyal love to Naomi. Oftentimes, we think about the book of Ruth as a love story between Ruth and Boaz, but really, it's a story of love between Ruth and Naomi. This is a great act of loyal love demonstrated to Naomi. After this, Boaz says, hey, listen, we want to go about this the right way. There's a guy, he's in head of line of me, and he deserves an opportunity to be the one to marry you and to buy the land. So we're going to do this the right way. So in the morning, Boaz sends Ruth back home with some barley to Naomi. Ruth tells Naomi everything that's happened, and it ends with Naomi and Ruth wondering what's going to happen next. Will Boaz and Ruth end up together? Will Naomi have a son? Will her line be redeemed? What's going to happen next? Like any good story, it ends on a cliffhanger. Now, we won't find out until chapter 4. So what's our takeaway from this? It's an incredible story, incredible true story. You may have noticed that the book of Ruth is a little different than most of the books in the Bible. See, God isn't really in it that much, is he? He's not like this big character. He doesn't speak through a prophet. He doesn't narrate the story. The moral of the story is not super obvious here. And we have to be careful because stories in the Old Testament oftentimes are not saying that we need to be like the people in the story. The book of Ruth isn't a story about how we need to be like Ruth or Naomi or Boaz. In fact, God uses stories of regular people to teach us something about himself. But what God teaches us about himself is something that we can take and we can apply to our life today because God never changes. The truth are always the same. So what can we take away from this story? Well, I believe that it is that we need to show faith by taking action. We need to show faith by taking action. Naomi and Ruth took the opportunity that was in front of them. They made a plan. They did their due diligence. They did their research, but they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know a lot of these details. They didn't know if the feet covering thing was going to work. That was a little bit of a long shot. They didn't know what Boaz was going to say. In fact, I believe that they showed greater faith by taking action. In fact, we show greater faith by taking action than by not doing anything. Because when we take action, we put ourselves in situations that are a little scary, where we don't always know the outcome. We don't always get the happy ending. We don't know what's going to happen. It takes more faith to step out and to take action than it does to sit back and to do nothing. But Ruth and Naomi show us that God can use our plan for his purposes. So maybe here you're still trying to figure out, like, what school am I going to take? What am I going to do? God would say, do your research and then pick one. Take action. Do something. In fact, it's so much more important what you do at school than what school you pick. Because along the way, Ruth never compromised her integrity. She was bold, but she never compromised her integrity. She wasn't willing to win over Boaz at any cost. And when we make plans, when we show faith, when we take action, we have got to maintain our integrity along the way. Maybe you're trying to figure out what house to buy and where to go and which one's going to make you the most money. It's so much less important what house you pick and how you use the house. Will the house that you live in be a shield that separates you from your community? Or will it be a place where you can be hospitable? A place where people who don't know the love of Jesus can come in and witness the love of Jesus lived out in your family? How will you use the house that you buy? It's important who we decide to marry, who we decide to date, but it's perhaps even more important that once you find somebody who loves Jesus more than they love you, when you get married, man, how you conduct yourself in that marriage is so, so important. Will you maintain your integrity in your marriage? We show faith by taking action and stepping out into things that are scary. That's when we need faith. We have an advantage that Ruth didn't have. We have an incredible, incredible advantage because Ruth didn't know necessarily the action that she should take. But Jesus tells us what we are supposed to do. He tells us that we need to go and to make disciples of all nations. In fact, if you're a believer here today, that is the purpose of your life. That is the number one thing that you need to do in your life. You don't have to look for it. You don't have to figure out a calling. More important than having a house that gives you a good rate of return, more important than having a job that helps you up the career ladder, more important than marrying somebody who you're going to be happy with, your number one top priority as given by Jesus Christ is to make disciples of all nations. And too often we can think that making disciples means that we need to share the gospel. Jesus did not say to go and to share the gospel with all nations. Now that's a piece of it. But he said, go and make disciples of all nations. That implies that you're building relationship with somebody. He didn't make a mistake. It's a lot less important walking someone down the Romans road saying the right things than it is building a genuine relationship, a gospel friendship with somebody that you can meet them where they're at and share the love of Jesus over time. That has got to be our top priority. That is not my opinion. That is what Jesus says. You know, I may have been the one to pick up the phone that day and call Victoria, but she was the one who shared the love of Jesus with her random coworker. She was the one who didn't know how I was going to react and started telling me, building a gospel friendship with me, and telling me and showing me the love of Jesus over time. And now, because of her faith, because of the action that she took, doing something that was a little scary, now I'm here and I have life. I have hope and joy and peace. I have a beautiful family, a wonderful home. We have a community. We have a church. God has changed so many of your lives because a teenager shared her faith with her coworker. Wow. Isn't that incredible? How many opportunities do we miss because we don't show faith by taking action? Do you guys know, I literally just learned this, it's so important. There have never been more people coming to faith in Jesus than right now. For all of human history, right now, every day, more people are coming to faith in Jesus than at any other time in human history. That's incredible. There are only two places on planet Earth where that's not happening. One is Europe, and two is the United States. It's the only places in the world. Christianity is exploding everywhere else, and it's declining here. I believe part of that is because we don't take action. Do you guys know that less than 1% of the people right here have a relationship with Jesus? The national average is 30%. On one of the darkest places in the world, we live in one of the darkest places in the world. God has chosen you to live here, right now, in this moment. What will you do with your moment? We are so easily distracted. I can be too. But we can't afford to be. We've got to cultivate gospel friendships with the people that God has put in our life and take action. Let's be a people who are bold. Let's take the moment and let's show our faith in Jesus by taking action together. Let's pray.